Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I am in the studio today with this conversation. I'm the only one here. So I want to take the time really just to kind of talk about some things that have been on my mind that I think that are very appropriate considering where we are in history, the time, what's happening in both Washington, in Wall Street, and how that impacts the things that are happening and turning up into our community. I have in the studio with me, sitting in for John B. in the Place to Be, is a producer that actually works with me on our sister station on KISS 107.1 FM, WTLZ, on the show Straight Talk, which airs on Sundays at 6 p.m. It's a live show, and I have with me Matthew. I call him White Soul because he's a white guy with a lot of soul. Matthew, certainly thank you for sitting in today to produce this segment of United Shades of Gray.
Yeah, what up, though? How are you doing today?
I am doing well. For those of you who aren't out there, Matt has spent a lot of his time growing up. He was in the Detroit, Michigan area, and so he gave me the standard "What up, doe," which is how folks in Detroit correspond. So we will certainly want to thank you for getting in. I want to just take a moment, and today I'm going to really talk about a series of things, but all of these things surround what is happening with this current administration. I've had a lot of firsthand knowledge and experience with some of the things I'm going to talk about. I've been talking with folks who have or who used to work for ICE and just kind of got some of their perspectives. And I said used to because they said, you know what, we got too much humanity to continue to do the work that they've been assigned to do. So that was their perspective. They were excited about signing up and being employed by the federal government in its initial capacity. But their words, not mine. The idea of what needs to take place and the implementation of that idea were very different when they showed up. And so we're going to talk today about this No Kings movement. We're going to really talk about some of the issues that exist out there in the world. We're going to get into this whole thing about what I have been saying since the election, before the election in November, September, October, June of 2024, that this was going to be a defining presidency. And as Joe Biden said, everybody wanted to make fun of him, that we were fighting for the soul of America. We now see that much of that is true. And so I want to get into a lot of that conversation. We're going to talk about it today. So when we talk about this idea of a No Kings movement, we've seen cities across the country really connecting and unifying around the idea and protesting around the concept of no kings. America does not want a king. And this current administration that we're currently working with, when they were first coming in, he kind of used the idea and thought about the concept or threw the concept around of, hey, yeah, what if I were in power forever? The idea of kingship, and toyed with it. One thing that has really proven true that I believe and I've seen happen with this current administration and this president is that, and this is one of the things that I said that I admired because I'm a firm believer that I love when people do what they say in most cases. And Mr. Trump had kind of said that a lot of the things that he was going to do, many people said, oh, no, he doesn't really mean it. The position is going to level him out. It's not going to work that way. I had so many of my friends. And what's funny is I'm not only talking about my white friends, but I'm talking about many Black African-American men who are saying, hey, he's going to be Trump. He's going to be great for my 401k. He's going to be great for the economy. A lot of my Hispanic friends, which is really interesting, seeing, I think, something like 76 to 78% of Hispanics voted for Donald Trump in this past election. And I was sharing with them, I said, yo, people, Trump was great for TV. He was entertaining. He was fun. He was humorous and exciting for TV. But the reality for real life, we don't need another display or an example of The Apprentice for running our country. But neither here nor there. I want to get to what some of those comments and those thoughts were from those individuals who were saying, hey, he's going to be great for the economy. He's going to turn this thing around. Biden screwed up the economy. And I will lend that to anyone because I am a person who truly believes as I look at our government and our governmental politics, the landscape of politics in this country, that as an African-American man who considers himself an American first, who has roots that lead me back to Africa. We've talked about that my family comes from Bunce Island. I know the ship, the Mary Kate or the Catherine that came over from Senegal and then to Bunce Island, bringing our folks over here. Excuse me, Sierra Leone, not Senegal. So I understand now. I have a full assurance of who I am. I am an American who is of African descent. They use the term African American. I prefer the term Black. And in talking with folks and hearing them and seeing the things that took place from this first administration, now the second administration with my white Republicans, my Black Republican friends, my Hispanic Republican friends, all who voted for this man because their statement was he was going to, first of all, deal with immigration. That was the number one target. Secondly, he was going to bring down cost on day one. He was going to make America, put America first. And he was going to make America great again. This was the story that I heard. And I was like, okay, very impressive. However, not being one who just listens to either right wing or left wing media, I'm an individual who loves to read. I believe that he who reads leads. And it's something that I've always believed in for all of my life. I take time and I read other articles and I read other things and I pay attention both to social media content, but to real news cycles and news circles where real information is being shared. I pay attention to letters to the editor and different things that come out that share stories and perspectives. And as I was listening to all of this stuff, and it was something that I've been talking about since probably late 2023 and certainly January of 2024, the idea of Project 2025. A warning, folks. Hey, Project 2025 is going to lead to the dissolution of public education, the defunding of it. It is going to deal with a situation in which Black folks will be put back into fighting for rights that they fought for in the 50s and 60s. I shared with you all that this was not only about Black, but this was more so an assault on class, an institution of a return to a classism, a situation where those who were the rich elite would lead and rule. I yelled these things from the roofs, from the highways and the hedges, like letting America know that this is what Project 2025 was about. And many of you and many of the individuals who, I was sharing these stories with did not believe it. As a fact, many folks in Black America thought that the position of the Supreme Court and Congress would never allow for a hijacking of power by one arm of our American government. And now we see that there is, and this is what's so interesting. This is only about 10 months in, heading into the 11th month of this administration. We've seen a record number of executive orders take place. We've seen a changing of how our political system works in a way that we never thought would be in existence. I'm going to tell you quite honestly, even though I was warning people about Project 2025, I thought to myself that there would be more individuals who would stand up, who would speak out, who would have a voice of dissent as it relates to the things that would take place. I believe in this concept and this idea of democracy with all of my heart. It was what I fell in love with as a young man growing up. It was one of the reasons why when I was turning 18, I was excited to cast my ballot and to go in and to vote. And so with all of these things taking place, I thought that this was, something that would be interesting to see how it played out. Even with number 45, now number 47 coming into office, a part of me had a hope that much of what was talked about on campaign trails was more rhetoric, and that, as we have seen with so many other presidents, that the office would settle him in. The office would bring about a sense of, okay, this is now real life. Some of these things we're never going to do. But what we have seen is a full enactment of what we have seen take place. Now, people criticize him and say that he lied when he said he never read Project 2025. I'm of the opinion that he probably was telling the truth. And I think if I were going to do something, I would make sure that I don't read it. But that doesn't mean that my staffers and other individuals would not be responsible for briefing me on what's going on. So I think that he probably told the truth there. I don't see him being an individual who's going to sit down and actually read. And so I guess I started off talking about he who reads leads. In this particular case, I may have made an error in judgment. But what we have seen take place, and now where we are, is worth noting. We have seen an abdication of the entire Congress, the Republican Congress in particular, not necessarily taking on the function, well, not doing it at all, not doing what they were called to do. We see the Supreme Court now taking a very different stance in a way that we have never seen before in our nation. And many of my Republican friends, both white, Mexican, black, brown, whatever, they are all kind of up in arms because what we are seeing is something that is approaching and acting as an autocracy, a rule by rich, just all kinds of, the power and the authority of a single individual and authoritarianism government taking place. I certainly thank those of you who are giving your insight. No one is watching or listening to this. Race Hustler, check the page, 0 likes on every post, DEI at its finest. That's very interesting, and I appreciate your comment, Mr. Ryan Labrie. And it's interesting because I get many people who respond to the conversations that we have here. And we have these conversations because I think it's important that in this nation, which is so racially divided, that we have a place that we can have real conversations and people can speak their mind. And so I appreciate your conversation. And if no one's listening, then I guess, hey, this is an exercise for something that is going to take place greater. That doesn't bother me at all. But as we see what is taking place here, we see this no kings movement that is now hitting the nation because people are feeling that with the Supreme Court being complicit, with Congress, our House and Senate being complicit, no one sounding the alarm, no one making any noise, no one is the voice of dissent in terms of what's happening, that we are in fact moving toward an authoritarian type of government where it appears to be more of a king. Whatever the king says is law. And I think that that's important. That's one of the key elements of a kingdom. The kingdom, whatever the king sat on the throne and whatever the king would speak or what he would decree or declare became law. And we now see that very type of governance taking place in this great country. So I'm going to get into this, and I want to just kind of, before we get into this conversation and we talk about some of the things that we see taking place, I want to just throw out there once again that our great forefathers, those who started this country, those who were integral in the documents that incorporated us as a nation, they created amendments after this, where they created the Constitution. And I said this before, understanding that blacks at the time of the framing of the Constitution were not considered to be human, not whole humans. Like 3/5 was where we were. So when we look at the Constitution, much of the Constitution in its initial state is framed in a way that racism is essential or is essential piece of how the Constitution was written. Some of those forefathers that were writing the Constitution did not think that blacks should be included or should be considered even American, and racism was essential to this piece. And I say this because oftentimes you will hear people of color use the phrasing institutional racism, and what we mean is that an institution has in its development and in its very core racism. And so many white people say we don't believe in institutional racism. And I think that's really rich because when we talk about institutionalized racism, we talk about how a system was framed. And when we look at the United States government and the Constitution, it was framed at a time when blacks were not considered even human, let alone Americans. And so it was framed in a way that spoke to the colonizers, those who came over. It was framed in a way that isolated and did not include the indigenous folks that were already here. It was framed and written in a way that those individuals who are part of this nation, largely the Mexican Americans or the Mexicans who much of America was considered Mexico, and we can get into the history. But in order for us to really look at America and look at the Constitution and look at what we're dealing with now, it means that we have to move from a whitewashed version of American history that has been taught in our history books for a very long period of time and really deal with what real history is about. And I hate, people say, why do we have to have Black history? Why do we have to have, Asian American or Asian Pacific Islander history? And it's because we have failed to tell the full story of history, a history which is both colorful, which is both painful, has moments of joy, but also anguish and pain are a part of that history. I was having a conversation, and this is so interesting. We're talking about this. I'm going to get to where we're going. But I was having a conversation with someone, and someone was talking about, well, people need to know about Black Wall Street. And I said to them, yes, I think that it's very important because we don't cover those things in our history books. And young Black men and boys and girls need to understand that their people own businesses and own things, and they own grocery stores and they own funeral homes and corporations and factories and newspapers. And it's important to identify those things in history because when you're represented in the great scheme of things, it builds in a sense of value that if they done it, I can also do it. But I shared with them that, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma was not the only place where blacks were doing it for themselves. I think about things, if you know anything about Georgia, understand about Lake Lanier is a lake that, white America said that they wanted to have, waterfront properties in that particular area. And underneath Lake Lanier lays another example or type of Black Wall Street. When we look at Central Park, the landscape of Central Park in New York City, I love Central Park. It is such an amazing piece of landscape, a vital piece, a green space that is powerful, but most people don't know about the town of Seneca, which was another type of Black community where blacks were self-sufficient, with not only churches, but housing and authorities. It was a self-sufficient community called Seneca. And in that place, when there was a need for green spaces, there was a total destruction of that entire area in New York City where a Black community lived and thrived. And it now is Central Park. When we look at other places, there's stories such as Rosewood. When we look at what was taking place during the Harlem Renaissance, with what was taking place in all of these areas, these places existed. As a matter of fact, in the New Frontier in Oklahoma and the Western settlements across the western part of the country, there were more than 40 different settlements in those areas where blacks were having communities, owning businesses, doing these types of things. And I think that it's important, not only for a young Black men to see that, but also for white America to understand that we were more than just chattel slaves. We were here providing a great service. We were building an amazing country. We are an essence of what has taken place in this country. And I want to say this, I shared my own personal story of how I came into the understanding of the role of my ancestors in this great nation. The very first Catholic church that was ordained by the Vatican to take place here in the United States. My fifth great grandfather was not only a part of that. They were forced to become Catholics, but they helped to build that first church. They helped to build Georgetown University. And all of these things are a part of what has taken place. So when we look fast forward today and we see the things that are taking place, and I want to get into this conversation about the current fight that's taking place, the assault on the 1965 Voting Rights Act, something that I've been screaming for. The thing that made me bad about what Joe Biden was doing is that he was not picking up the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And now, as a people, we see that there is a great assault on the rights, the voting rights, the equity that exists in voting for Black Americans. So I want to get into that conversation because I think that the most powerful tool that any individual in this nation has is their right to vote. And your right to vote, the ability to cast your ballot for policies, for individuals, for things that are important for us to move forward, is an essential part of the fabric of America. And when that right is tampered with, when the fairness of your vote and the levity or the ability of your vote, the weight of your vote, is tampered with, we now are dealing with something that is so vital and important to the very fabric of this great nation. When I come back from this commercial break, we're going to get into the depth of those things. We're going to talk briefly about the 13th Amendment, which was the abolition of slavery. We're going to talk about the 14th Amendment, where former slaves and all of those other individuals, those African-American descendants of slave, as well as those indigenous and the Mexican Americans, were brought in to give citizenship. And we'll also talk about the 15th with guaranteed voting rights. We'll take a quick commercial back. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem Bowen, and we're back with more of United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. And I want to give a shout out to my guy, Ryan Labrie, who is out there. He has taken the time to spend this time with me, time that is going to be well spent, not wasted. At least if he doesn't get anything else, he's going to get an education, something maybe that he has lacked up in this day. So we want to make sure that we empower you with the facts on today. So we were talking about the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendment. The 13th being the abolition of slavery, the 14th being former slaves were granted rights to citizenship. That's African-American descendants of slave. That's what we mean when we say ADOS. And in addition to that, we saw that same 14th Amendment then be used for those indigenous individuals, as well as Mexicans that were already in the country, and any other individuals that were a part of the fabric of the being at that time that were not given citizenship under the Constitution. And then we want to look at the 15th Amendment with the 15th Amendment with guaranteed voting rights for males who were former slaves. Now, that was something that was important. As we continue through time, we saw that white women and Black women were also given rights to vote. And many of the things that Blacks fought for in terms of those amendments through the 15th, the 50s and the 60s, those rights and those laws were then extended to other people groups that were across the nation. We saw first Blacks, then we saw the indigenous, we saw Mexican Americans, and then other groups, women's rights, women's suffragists, and other things of that nature, going into the LGBTQ plus community and other people who walked through the doors and walked the path that was trailed or blazed by African American descendants of slaves. And then we saw recently that the Supreme Court ruling that was passed down, the Supreme Court backed President Donald Trump's effort to curtail lower courts orders that hampered his agenda for months in a case related to birthright citizenship. And essentially, when we saw this, Trump is holding events at the White House and situations and having meetings to determine what now is an American citizen. And this is all kind of pulled into this concept of illegal immigration. We've seen what's been taking place with that. My thoughts at the beginning of that is that we would start out with dealing with issues of illegal immigrants. And then eventually, I didn't think that they were the only target, but I thought that the target was a bit more ominous. And with the details of the things that I see taking place now, I think it is very clear. And I think many of my white counterparts who are really just even killed Americans who want America to be a better place. I do believe that we need to have strong borders. I do believe that there should be a pathway to citizenship. I'm not even going to get into that whole conversation, but I think that those things are important. But what we're now seeing is that Americans, people who are American citizens, are now being threatened. They're being harassed. Their due process rights are being overlooked. And we don't see any particular body that is standing up for American citizens who are being harassed, who are being awakened in the dark of night, who are being pulled over on the side of the streets. I told you it would start with those illegal immigrants, and it became legal Mexicans, and now it is Black, which I think is one of the key populations that this government is targeting. And many of my Republican friends who say, you know, Kareem, when you first started saying this, we could not see it. We didn't see it that way, but it's kind of hard to believe that some of what you're saying is actually true. So prior to the ruling, the Supreme Court, the conservative majority on Monday delivered a significant win for Trump's administration's agreement. And this is a while back. They cleared the way for officials to resume deportation of immigrants to third countries without additional due process requirements and all those other things. We then saw a continuation of that conversation where the Supreme Court has basically said that it's okay for us to use race and language as an ethnicity as tools to determine who were American citizens when ICE began to engage. Now, let me tell you why that is so dangerous. And when we look at that is because when we look at individuals that may come to this nation, such as Haitians, who happen to be Black, when we look at individuals such as Dominicans who may come here that are Black, when we look at individuals that are from Puerto Rico, and the understanding that they are American citizens and are protected, but they look other, if you understand what I mean. So it opens up an opportunity, this current decision by the Supreme Court, to otherize an entire group of American citizens that can be lumped in, mistaken for other populations that are in this country. And so when we look at this, we're looking at all of these things taking place. We're looking at this idea of the 14th Amendment, this concept of due process that is now being toyed with. But even more so now, we have moved to a more dangerous state, and that is an attack on the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Let's talk about what's going on. Recently, let me just talk to you guys about what that 1965 Voting Rights Act is. And when we look at this, I think it's important to take into consideration that when we start messing with voting rights, we're messing with the fabric of America. We saw it take place in Texas. The woman, Jasmine Crockett, has been the biggest voice out there, but there are other Black faces and Hispanic faces and other allies that are saying, hey, we cannot do this. A tampering, a gerrymandering is the word of seats for the purpose of getting greater strength for political gain. And what's crazy is that we have moved into a place that we now see, since there will not be accountability or an administration being held by the Supreme Court, that they will not be held accountable by Congress, at least the Republican portion of Congress, that they are being emboldened in how they operate and the things that they do and the things that they say publicly. We're seeing now states taking up the same fight that started in Texas. And we see and I don't even agree with what Gavin Newsom did, but he did it in retaliation to make up the difference for what took place in Texas. And so we now see this thing taking place in other states. We now have a massive situation taking place in the South that is poised to really change the way that we are able to put in office anybody other than a Republican. And I'll say this again, I am neither Republican or Democrat, but I'm an independent. I don't believe that either party has in its situation or its structure or its framework really what's important to Black America in this single point of time. But the Voting Rights Act of 1965, this is what it says. It was a landmark federal law that prohibited racial discrimination in voting and it was designed to enforce the voting rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, it banned discriminatory practices like literacy tests and things of that nature that kept folks from voting, provided for federal oversight of voter registration in areas with a history of voter suppression. We see right now a concerted effort and a desire for many people to say, hey, let the states decide. And if we were living in a utopia, in a perfect society, I would be one to say less federal regulation and that the states should decide. And I think that across the board, right? But the reason this law and these regulations and these stipulations and these acts were put into place was because many states in the North said, hey, everyone should be given a right to vote. Let's make this happen. And it wasn't as laissez-faire as it wasn't as such as a free society as that. But I'm simplifying it for the purpose of understanding. We saw many states in the South who were fighting and still reeling from the loss of free labor of African slaves in chattel slavery that were saying, hey, the federal government, we should be able to do what we want to. The federal government can pass rules and regulations, but we are going to keep certain things here because we want to remain in power. We want to move from slavery into Jim Crow laws and the black laws and all those other things. And so the federal government had to then come in to put oversight in place to make sure that the regulations that were now being provisions by the Constitution were enforced. So as we look at this voter suppression and the fight that the states are making to make their own laws is a reversal of many of the rights and the reason and also the reasoning that took place as to why they were incapable of doing it. Power will never be able to police itself. So the act significantly increased political participants for minority groups, especially in the South. Now, let's talk about these key provisions because some of us operate in false information and fake information. The key provisions ban discriminatory practices and outlawed literacy tests, which are a common barrier to voting for Black folks. They were denied the ability to read and write, and they were given literacy tests to see if they were capable and being able to vote. So those were outlawed. We saw federal oversight. It authorized the Attorney General to send federal examiners to register voters in areas where less than 50% of the non-white population was registered. So it put into play a real push to bring into the process, the voting process of those who were historically franchised and were very afraid because if they went to polling stations, they were often given the runaround. Many of their lives were threatened. And we see those practices, the idea of wanting to allow people to open carry in voting areas. We see those regulations coming into place, and those are really threats on people's right to cast a fair and free ballot. We saw a challenge to poll taxes. We saw pre-clearances where certain jurisdictions with a history of discrimination to get federal approval from the Department of Justice or a court before changing their voting laws. Many of the things that we see taking place today, and the impact and the significance of those things is this. It increased political participation. The fact that we have individuals and the Republican Party over the past few years has been on an all-out spree to do whatever it is to suppress voter access to the polls, voters that are on the roll, voters who are American citizens that should be given the right to vote. It has been doing everything to suppress. Now, I believe that we as a nation are our best when everyone who has a thought and has an opinion has the right to cast their ballot and to exercise what I think is one of the fundamental pieces of what it means to be American. We say now increased participation. The act had an immediate and substantial impact, leading a narrowing of the registration gap between black and white voters in the decades that were following. It is impossible, and this is why I say the Democratic Party, hopefully they shake, rattle, and roll themselves, slap themselves across the face, and understand that without black voters, it is impossible for you to ever be seated and to really be able to operate in and win in this nation. So I want to read some of these comments that are out there. I see a comment that happened before by Jack Frost that made some things out there. And if you can put that up there, I greatly appreciate that. To my participant, Jack Frost out there, one of the first things Biden did when he was elected was submit a bipartisan bill to fix the immigration process, more immigration judges and attorneys, more interpreters and administrative staff. It was immediately refused. Then he put forward another bill written by a Republican senator that gave the right nearly everything they asked for, everything they asked for, and it was refused because Trump did not want Biden to have a political win while campaigning. They don't have a leg to stand on about this issue. We now have Yancey Wingard out there. I take your point on all of this history. I only ask when it comes to the No Kings movement is what is the call to action for this movement. I would agree with you, sir. A protest has to not only have the desire to stand and to protest, but there has to be a call to action. And that's one of the reasons why I celebrated the fact that people were having their right to assemble and to protest. But a protest without a call to action in a movement, it will fall flat. And to whom? How will success be measured and determined? This is what builds power and protest, concise action. There is no succinct policy to advocate for the movement. The movement's political ally, the Democrats, distance themselves when it comes to legitimate action that could take place and often sided with Republicans when they could have slowed things down. Now, Mr. Yancey, you are out there and what you're saying is absolutely true. That's why I find a lot of fault in this policy. The fact that many Democrats voted for a recognition of any kind for what I consider a self-proclaimed by the actions racist. When I see them standing up and voting for an acknowledgement of what takes place there, many Democrats became complicit in that. For whatever reason, we don't want to break the cycle, break the unity. There is no unity. Because a part of the problem, Mr. Yancey, is that many Democrats, many of our white Democrat friends, a lot of the things that Republicans or the far right are saying about blacks being given too many rights, about there's too much equity being thrown out there. Many of our Democrat Republicans, our senators, not our Republicans, our Democrats, our representatives in the Senate and both the House of Representatives feel the same way. And so when I look at individuals like Fetterman, who is a blue state is a Democrat, who considers himself a Democrat, but he has really voted more like Republicans. So we have to, as a community of black folks, we've got to begin to understand that we cannot dedicate or commit ourselves to a single party, but we have to really begin to think about what are the ideals and the principles that are most important in our community. And we have to begin to coalesce and build a response and action that centers around the things that we find most important. We're no longer in a time when we can just go along to get along, that we can no longer take a backseat, say, okay, we're going to continually allow you to pick, white individuals to represent black communities when there are viable candidates in those communities. And that's the thing. I want to make sure that they're viable candidates because we are entering into a place that our civil rights are really being gone after. Our voting rights are in peril. So let's get to this because we got 5 minutes left here. But I want to thank you, Yancey Wingard II, for that point, because I believe the same thing. We have to have a call to a movement so that we can stand strong and stand firm. So now what we see taking place, another state, the state of Louisiana, has a case that is now getting ready to be heard by the Supreme Court. And it all centers around the 1965 Voting Rights Act, What is it about the 1965 Voting Rights Act that threatens so many Americans? It is the fact that that act is the only thing that provides equity for all people of color, in particular, Black people of color. So now the Supreme Court has decided that they're going to take up this fight. And so this Louisiana versus Callius, I think is what it is, challenges the constitutionality of using race to draw congressional districts, potentially weakening a key provision of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This is, I think, Section 2. This case concerning Louisiana redistricting map that created a second majority Black congressional district centers on the argument that Equal Protection Clause prohibits the use of race as a basis for redistricting. The court heard arguments for a second time this month. Now, let me tell you what is a key piece of what we need to understand about what's taking place. In this particular situation, there is a move to redistrict or gerrymander in a way. Normally, these things happen. The census happens every 10 years. And with that census, we then have a look at congressional maps and what they look like and how they lay. This is something that is taking place outside of the framework of what normality or normalcy is, because there is a need to make sure that we put these things in place before these midterm elections in 2026, and then also this next presidential election in 2028, which if these things go through, it will be impossible for any other people to be voted into law. There will be a very huge imbalance in terms of how voices are being represented. And what I mean by that is this: to redistrict population centers where centers of population where you're supposed to be able to have an equal vote present. So if you are in based upon the population that you represent, and so if you're in an urban district, because of the population center, it then allows that population center to have a more weighted presence in terms of their vote, right? And we don't go by popular vote here in the country. The forefathers said we're too dumb to be able to make that decision for ourselves. So there's an electoral college in play, right? And so moving these things to where we would give rural communities, redrawing those to give them more power means that African Americans, minorities, Hispanics would then lose the weight of their vote in those areas because of the redrawing of those lines. In some cases, losing multiple number of representatives in those areas, empowering rural communities with a greater voice. Okay. I think it's important. One thing that I thought about when we were talking about this is where they build prisons. Prisons are not usually built in center of the country, but they are population based. And if I'm correct, those population bases, whether it's 1,500 prisoners in a particular area, usually also play into the vote in terms of how many people are in a particular district. And for a long time, they were not allowed to vote. And I think that's one of the reasons. If they can be factored into that vote, they should be allowed to vote. And so we see a fight for them being able to vote. And so now we are fighting all over again, the fight of 1965, to make sure that every individual that casts a ballot, that ballot carries a weight that is consistent with the base of the population in which they live. I don't believe that folks in rural America should be left out, just as I believe that those who are in urban America should have a strong voice, just like everyone else. And to deny the ability to cast a fair vote with the same weight of every other American just ain't American. So I hope you guys continually tune in. Thank you for those who are out there. Jack Frost, thank you for your comment. Trump contracting Governor Abbott in Texas to demand that he withdraw districts to benefit Republicans says it all. They cannot win without the message that they have, so they promote these other things. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming in on today. I want you to stay with your ear to the ground. Don't get dismayed. Stay connected, because it's so vital that you know what's going on. God bless you and everyone out there. Take care of yourselves and each other. Grace and peace.